Welcome to the Good News Mama podcast, a place to get in touch with other mamas, share the load, and know the Lord. Here we aim to lift each other up in the good news of Jesus and the laughter that comes with motherhood. We are a community of mamas just trying to keep the main thing the main thing. I'm your host, Lynn Carter, and each time you tune in, I pray you are encouraged and that you leave challenged and breathe a sigh of relief that you are understood. We were not meant to do life alone, Mama. Thanks for joining in. Let's do this and let's share the good news. Hey, Mama. I hope that you're doing well. I'm glad you're here for this episode. I'm interviewing Brittany Bergman. She's an author and a mama, and of course, because she writes, she has an amazing way with words, and this episode is no doubt any different than her book. I was so excited to talk with her about expecting wonder, and we dove into how motherhood is a spiritual process, almost a rebirth of some sort. It was like the victories of motherhood, empowerment. It was being grateful to your body for making something beautiful and loving that dear friend when you look in the mirror, you might not recognize your body. We talked about how your body is strong and beautiful and how it did an amazing thing to bring a human into the world and how to be tender with yourself after having given birth and to lower some of the expectations to realize that things might not go as planned. But it's all such a beautiful gift. Well, I'm not going to tell you the whole thing. Just listen. She's fun. We had a great time. I love the way that she shared her story and really just opened up my eyes to a different side of motherhood. And I've given birth 3 times. So listen, enjoy. And if you stick around, I share a link to a resource on how to ask for help, which, come on, is not always the easiest thing. So get your hands on it, use it, and ask for help so you're not so overwhelmed. We are all in this together, Mama. Thank you, Brittany, for being here today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yes, girl. Thank you for sending me your book. I've enjoyed reading bits and pieces. I'm not going to lie. I'm more of a audio book listener than a reading the book because I just don't sit down and take the time. But I really did enjoy reading through the pieces of your book that I was able to look at. And I'm excited to talk about it. And your book is called Expecting Wonder, The Transformative Experience of Becoming a Mother by Brittany Bergman. And when did you come out with your book? It looks brand new.
It basically is. It's a newborn book. It released in August of 2020.
Oh, yay. Wonderful. I'm so excited for you. And I love the cover. It's so cool. And that writing. I wish I could write like that.
You.
That looks
Me
awesome.
Me too.
Yes. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your family and just your passion and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So I've been married to my husband, Dan, for 7 years, and we have 2 kids. Selah is going to be 5 in just a couple of weeks, and my son, Eamon, is 18 months old. And Expecting Wonder really focuses on my pregnancy, like sort of the first time around with Selah. And I know we'll talk more about that later, but we live in the suburbs of Chicago. Pretty much all our family is here. We're really rooted here, even though I grew up all over the place and definitely have the itch to keep going. Our family keeps us grounded here. And as a day job, I work in publishing. So I work as a copy editor of nonfiction books at Tyndale House, which is different from my books publisher. I publish the book with Broadleaf. So I've been doing that for about 6 years now. And I absolutely love it. I love working with books all day and in my spare time.
So, go into that a little bit for me because I have no experience. Like when I think of what you just described to me, I think of The Proposal with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds, like immediately, like that type of like reading a book, copywriting, that sort of thing. So tell me a little bit more about what that means with your job.
So when a book comes to copy editing, it has already been through a couple of phases of editing. So it comes through acquisitions, and they're the editors who kind of go after authors, negotiate contracts, like look for new voices, and they might shape the overall like big picture development of a book and like where it might fit into the marketplace and in our lineup. Okay. And then after that, it comes to an editor who is usually somebody on my team, and they do sort of the big picture structural edit down to some line editing, like really shaping the book at like that medium to big picture. And then when it gets to me, I'm really focused on the details. And so I'm making sure that everything conforms to our in-house rule book, making sure that all the commas are consistent, making sure, also some of the more subjective things. My job is to make the authors sound more like themselves. And if I do my job well, they'll never notice that I did it.
Nice. Which is so funny. I'm really glad that you said that, because reading part of your book, I understand what you're saying about the details. It sounds right up your alley, because one of your stories in there about how detail oriented you are and such a planner, and like have this vision of how you want things to go. Like you mentioned your trip to Disney and how you had like everything planned out like to the T. Like your wedding day. Oh my gosh. Like I was laughing at that. That was great. Like how you like literally have like 15-minute increments of the whole day and like the whole flow. And like you could see that in your head. Of course, it never goes that way, right? There's always something that happens, but it was just like, I get this, girl. Like I have been there. I feel that need to control, that need to have everything laid out. It drives my husband crazy. He's like, why do something today when you can wait to do it tomorrow? And I'm like, no, that's not, we're going to have a plan. So when you said that about like the detail oriented part of the book, I'm like, oh my gosh, that job sounds perfect for you. That's awesome.
It is a good fit, especially I'm such a perfectionist too, that on the one hand, my job is quite literally to make things perfect. And so it's a very good fit in that way. Yeah. But it's also a lot of pressure, because when I fall short or I make a mistake, it feels like a colossal failure.
It's so funny that you say that, because even today, okay, my 6-year-old, he's in kindergarten. He came home with his sight word test. So they know like maybe 20 words at this point, if that. And he missed 3 of them. And rather than thinking like, oh, like anything negative about him, I naturally think I should have studied more with him. I should have done, like immediately going to what I need to do. It's already like that critical like feeling. And I'm just like, chill out. He's in kindergarten. He missed 3 words. Each of them had 2 letters. Like, calm it down, girl. So the fact that you're like talking about this battle that like on the one hand, you need the perfectionism for your job, but on the other hand, you realize as a mom, there's no way you can have perfectionism, because motherhood is anything but. Like you have to be flexible. So I get that. That's very cool. In fact, today, like I had to laugh about this, because as I'm looking at your book last night and thinking over our conversation today, I was like, being flexible, that has got to be one of the key elements of motherhood that I've learned, and that you brought about in your book, that you realized, after you gave birth and in your birth plan, which we'll talk about a little bit. But today it was like monsoon down. I work in physical therapy, going into people's homes. So it was bad weather. I got flooded in to a patient's driveway for 3 hours. And I'm just laughing like, okay, God, like, this was coming. Like the whole time I'm thinking, be flexible, just like you mentioned. And it worked out fine. My husband rescued me and we swapped vehicles so I could get his truck and not drown. But it was just comical, really. The fact that God teaches you something right before you need it, or right at that moment. So I just love that about how motherhood has shown me that. And talking about your book and talking about your birth plan and everything, and how you had this like grand vision. Why don't you tell it kind of what your thought was? Because Selah is your first. And so this book is reflecting that. And I liked also how in the beginning of the book, like your book goes through a timeline of pregnancy. And even in the beginning stages of your book, you talked about kind of a few things that happened after she was born, like with one of your friends and in vitro and stuff like that. And so I really liked how it was beautifully woven throughout the book, like experiences that you had and your birth story. So why don't you share that part?
Oh, thank you. That is really kind feedback, and it means so much to me. So by the time we got around to thinking about birth plans, I had a pretty clear lesson in learning to let go of control. From the very beginning, we realize how little control we have, especially in that first trimester of worrying, is the baby still alive? Am I miscarrying right now? Like I could get to like a 12-week doctor appointment and never know what was happening inside my womb. And it was really terrifying for me. And through so many experiences in those first 2 trimesters, I felt like God really helped me to relinquish that super tight grip on control. So then I maybe swung a little bit too far the other way with my birth plan, where I thought, I'm going to resist every control freak tendency I have, because you hear so many women say, my birth didn't go according to plan. Like, I wrote the birth plan and then it was nothing like what I wanted. Or, I ended up needing this emergency procedure or that. And it just felt like I knew myself so well at that point that I knew if I pinned my hopes and my expectations on it going one certain way, and I knew that there was pretty much no chance that it would go exactly how I wanted, and knowing how much pressure I put on things and how after the fact I can just dwell and regret and feel such grief, that I didn't want to put myself through that. So I really swung the other way and said, okay, my birth plan is that I'm going to figure it out as I go, because, right, that's what nurses are for. Like, they're going to help me through this, and I'll probably get an epidural and it'll be fine. What I didn't realize was that I was still hanging on to this vision of how it was going to go in my heart of hearts. I thought, I imagined timing the contractions at home and they would come on slowly, and I'd wonder, oh, is this it? And my husband and I would kind of have this movie moment where we'd look at each other and say, this is it. We have to go to the hospital now.
Just like in the movies, right?
Just like in the movies. And instead, I ended up with strep throat in week 39 of my pregnancy.
Yep.
Just laid out on the couch, praying instead that this baby would stay in long enough that I could get healthy. And fortunately, she did. And then time just kept ticking and ticking and ticking until we got to almost 42 weeks when I had to be induced.
Wow.
The day after Thanksgiving. So actually we ate Thanksgiving dinner and then headed to the hospital for the induction because I had to go overnight. So it really was a grieving process of when I realized, okay, I'm going to make it to my scheduled induction. This baby is not coming on her own. Having to even release that vision of how I wanted it to go without even really having realized that I was hoping for that in a way. And just this beautiful community of women surrounded me at the last minute. I put out an all call in just like this Facebook group that I'm a part of. And I said, I never thought I'd end up with an induction. I'm so scared. I've heard these terrible stories about Pitocin. Can you guys just flood me with your positive birth stories? Yeah. And they came through. I think 300 people commented on that, all positive induction stories. And it just fueled me all the way to the hospital. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Yes. I resonated so much with your story about the birth plan because, I have 3 boys. My third pregnancy, well, let's just be real. All the pregnancies were kind of crazy. I feel like there's got to be at least one scare during your pregnancy for it to be a legit pregnancy. And with technology today, it's so like super fine-tuned and honed in. They see every little thing. So with our third baby, he was definitely like, there was issues with his stomach. Was it fully developed? There was like all these things, like, which God turned into beautiful blessings and completely showed up and grew our faith basically. But when it was time to have him, I did have to have Pitocin. The other 2 I had already had naturally. I didn't have to have an epidural. I had gone through all these birth classes. And so I'm thinking, just like you, oh, it's going to be just like that. It's going to be great. It's going to be no problem. And then all these little hiccups started coming along, and then you had to have Pitocin. And you said something in your book, like when you finally relaxed, that's when Selah was able to come. It was like you were, we kind of forget that we have to like breathe into the contractions and like embrace them because they're what's moving the baby down. But I was so gripped with like the pain that I was not relaxing. And as soon as I gave in and I'm like, okay, please just let me have this epidural. And they literally went out the door. It's like my body went, ugh, and the baby came right then. It was so wild, but it was so much different. And like you said, in your birth story and your actually what happened, it awakened something new inside of you, like as a mother, first off, right? Because that was you becoming a mother when you gave birth, but also just like a sense of empowerment, a sense of like you got to the point where you said, I can't do it. And you just wanted to die. That's like basically what you're feeling like, I want this to be over right now. And nobody's in this but me right now, you know? So I feel like every mom can resonate with that it's this surrender to what you've never experienced before.
Yeah. Getting to that point in labor, it is so unbelievably lonely. Like even if your support person is there with you, even if, you know, you have a nurse with you, a doctor, even I had nurses in the room with me who had given birth before. And yet I felt so unbelievably alone in that moment because no one was feeling that pain with me right then. They were all there watching me in this pain. But no one was in it with me. And I so felt that way. And I think this is why I say that I swung a little bit too far the other way in my birth plan, because literally no one told me how contractions work. Like I took a hospital birth class where they sort of gave me an overview of the process. And I know, okay, so the contractions are like, I understood the mechanics of labor, but no one told me that I have to actually do something besides survive the contraction. Like they taught me how to breathe through it, but I thought those were all survival techniques.
Right.
No one really explained to me that if you tense up during the contraction, your whole body is going to stay closed. And because that's the fear, pain, tension cycle, I think that's what it's called, where, you know, you feel the pain, you feel afraid, you tense up, then you feel more pain and, you know, and it just keeps going and going. And your body never really has a chance to open up and release, but it's completely counterintuitive to try to relax through the pain. Like that's not what your body wants to do. And so I thought, oh, this will come naturally because women know how to give birth and the nurse will tell me what to do. But really, like, I also didn't realize that wasn't the nurse's role, which is why I hired a doula with my second birth. I mean, my nurses were fabulous, but like they weren't meant to be labor coaches. That's not their role in the room. So
which is so funny that you mentioned that because I had a doula for all three of my births. And the first two, I guess the classes that I took were more fresh in my mind. And by the third one, it finally hit me like I was not relaxing into like embracing that this is helping the baby come out. Let this happen. It was like all resistant. Don't feel the pain, you know, that sort of thing. So
exactly. Yeah. So as I just continued to clench and tense, I mean, I labored, I think. So I went in overnight with my first. They did like the cervidil to try to ripen the cervix. And that actually kicked me right into active labor. So, or maybe not active labor, because I was only at like a 1.5 when I got to the hospital. So I labored pretty hard from about midnight to 9 a.m. when the doctor checked me. And I had only gone from a 1.5 to a 2.
Same girl. You're speaking my third labor story. I was like hitting me. Yes.
It is so discouraging. And again, I didn't know that I was supposed to be relaxing into this the intensity of this pain. And so she said to me, she saw my discouragement and my tears, and she knew how hard I had been working. And she goes, like, it's in your birth plan, or, you know, I didn't like have a formal birth plan, but my doctor knew I wanted an epidural. She's like, let's just do it now. I think if your body relaxes, this is all going to go so much faster for you. And so we placed the epidural so much earlier than I ever thought we would. And yeah, like you said, my body just, as soon as I had a chance to relax, it flew through the rest of labor.
Wow.
And again, like
Good
a
call.
remarkably different experience with my second. I practiced hypnobirthing. I worked with a doula, and I really focused on relaxing and like opening my cervix and like basically sending messages to my
Yeah.
own body through
Yeah.
mantras and visualization and just trying to make that connection from my mind to my muscles. And I progressed so much faster the
It's
second, even in a
amazing.
remarkably similar situation. I was induced with him
Yeah.
too. And I also just felt emotionally so much more empowered.
Hey, Mama, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, that sounds so great, oh, that sounds so wonderful, but how in the world do I ask for help? How do I reach out when I am overwhelmed and I don't know what to do? Well, go ahead and grab my free resource at my bit.ly link, which is bit.ly/goodnewsmama, ask for help. You'll get the free resource. I'd love to see you use that and tell me what you think. But basically, we're just trying to demystify this thing about being vulnerable, letting our guard down, and asking for help in a real way that leads to peace in our lives and actually builds community with others around us. I love you guys, and I want you to thrive in your motherhood. So go grab that resource, bit.ly/goodnewsmama, ask for help. It's so funny you say that too, because even just training for a race or something like physically demanding, the same thing is very empowering, right? Having mantras, having like envisioning the finish and stuff like that. It's like, why wouldn't we have that same thought process with birth instead of just
Yeah.
surviving it, like actually embracing it, progressing it, that sort of thing, which that reminds me of, kind of part of how you shared about listening to your body and your own needs. You mentioned that during your pregnancy, and I don't know if it was kind of like getting into your third trimester, you went to a conference, and it's usually what you're all about. You enjoy those things. And just the second day, you were like, I feel so lonely. I'm homesick. I need to go home. And you just didn't punish yourself. You went home and you immediately felt relief from that. And it was just so, I was so excited for you reading that part of the book and like really knew kind of the victory that takes and that is, because it's against what you had set out to do. And I think for people, like we share that in common, like when we have a goal and we have something in place, we try to stick it out and see it through. And you just basically said, this isn't serving me. This isn't what I need right now. I'm going to listen to my body. I'm going to listen to my needs and my feelings. And you went home and I was like, yes, go Brittany. Like that was so awesome that you did that. And it just made me think about like, even just our babies and how babies, they listen to their own bodies. Like as a physical therapist, I try to teach people diaphragmatic breathing so they can recover faster. I'm like, babies do this naturally. Adults do not. Like babies use their bellies to breathe. Adults breathe up and down, like with their apical muscles. And it's like we have to reteach ourselves what's natural because we've suppressed things so much, and we just need to embrace the way God designed it. So I love that part of your story too, because it was almost like a small victory that had taken me a really long time to learn that it's okay to change. It's okay to pivot. I feel like that's the word of 2020, like pivot into something new, right?
Pivot and flexibility.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
This
Flexibility is not usually a word that anyone would think to use to describe me, but we are all getting a master class in both things.
Girl, no joke. No joke. There's one quote that I definitely wanted to share. It was about kind of embracing motherhood and the newness of motherhood. And it was in your chapter on dormancy. And I'll just read it because I wrote it down. I wanted to keep it. It said, the only way to our new identities as moms is through a willingness to let go of pieces of ourselves, the way a tree releases its leaves, trusting that something both new and familiar will take their place. And it just reminded me of like the change in seasons, the fact that, like you mentioned, our bodies know what to do. We've never experienced motherhood, but it's so beautiful, and just trusting that it's going to be what God intended it to be. And I just thought that was such a beautiful picture. I could imagine it, and I thought on it because I remember right after, maybe 2 months after I had given birth, my husband came to me and was like, are we ever going to be normal again? I'm like, well, this is the new normal. Like, I know it's difficult right now, but this is going to be good, and trying to embrace the change and realize the beauty that's in it. And so I just loved how you share that example and, what was your feeling as a first-time mom? Like, what was your in the hospital room and the first few weeks after, like obviously fatigue and just doing all the things, but there was a change that happened. What was that like for you with Selah?
Yeah, I felt like coming out of childbirth, even as soon as the very next morning, I kind of stumbled into the bathroom because, you're so
Mm.
exhausted. I felt like I could barely move my legs. And I was just like, I was still caked in whatever birth did to me. I was
Right.
just a mess. And I looked in the mirror, and again, like, given the perfectionism, given how much I value like self-discipline and sticking to the plan and always being presentable and always being put together, I never could have expected that when I looked in the mirror, that in the face of like my shell-shocked eyes, I would feel such tenderness. Like I just felt so much tenderness toward myself, which is a new experience for me. I suddenly felt very fiercely in love with my daughter, but I felt so tender toward me. And I feel like having come through such a harrowing experience of childbirth, truly facing down death, as we all get to this point where we wish we could die instead of continue living through this pain, and then coming out on the other side of it, it truly was just this electrifying experience. And so when I looked in the mirror, it wasn't just that I felt like this warrior goddess, which in some ways I did, but I just felt so grateful to my own body, which again was a really new experience for me because I've spent so much of my life trying to control and subdue my body and make it smaller and make it prettier and make it the things that I think it should look like.
Yeah.
That it has always felt more like an object to me. And when I looked in the mirror that day, I just saw the dearest friend who had walked with me, and really, like, my body had guided me. My body really had known what to do all along. Again, I had to kind of get out of my own way to allow that to happen. But oh, I just felt such love for that woman in the mirror. And at the same time, I also felt a huge amount of overwhelm. Like, okay, I've had this personal revelation, but I actually still don't know how to be a mom. And
Right.
so that tension was very much there in the hospital, that I felt so empowered and just so on top of the world in some ways. And in other ways, I'm like, I don't know how to get this baby to latch.
Right.
What am I going to do when I go home? But having come through the process of pregnancy and then the process of childbirth, I think it showed me that I would figure it out eventually,
Yeah.
that I could trust myself, that I could trust the process. Like, it had gotten me this far already. I could trust the people that I was surrounded with to cheer me on and encourage me and support me. And so that was really a confidence booster too. And just knowing, just feeling such a new understanding also of God's love for me in that moment. Like, I, having never experienced what it's like to be a parent, like, I couldn't imagine what it's like for God the Father to feel the way he does about us, and to just have gone through that deeply spiritual process of childbirth, like, where I felt like I was laboring with God and creating with God, and that we had birthed this new person into the world together. It just felt like so many things aligned in that moment. And so while that doesn't mean that I had it all figured out right then, it did. Like you said, it just set me on a different trajectory.
Yes. I love how you said that you looked in the mirror and saw an old friend, and that you just could embrace the newness of where you were, but also the appreciation for what you had done. Like, that's a miracle. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And just the gift that it is to be a mom and to have the spiritual awakening of what it's like as a parent, like God the Father, like you said, because I've learned so many lessons from my children where I'm like, like I've mentioned before in episodes of the podcast, where my devotions are far from what they used to be. Like I used to be able to spend hours like studying, going through the different devotions, like no interruptions, all that. Now I'm happy to get one verse that I can dwell on the whole day, right? And then I look at my kids and I'm constantly getting revelation from them like, oh my gosh, that's what God thinks about me. Like that's exactly how God looks at me. And I literally am just like, I have chills just saying this, but I immediately, and it's just like this aha, like awakening just happens within me that I couldn't get from a scripture verse because I wasn't living it. You know what I mean? And so just exactly what you said, that you were like co-laboring, co-birthing with God. And it's beautiful. I just love that picture in my mind. Yes. Let's talk about a little bit more, and we can wrap up with this talk about body image, because you did mention that in your pregnancy and just what you had gone through and the way that you viewed your body before. And I feel like it's a real thing, especially for moms like of multiple children like me right now. My body is not what it once was, and just embracing that, and also having some forgiveness, not holding yourself to a standard that's unrealistic. What was that like for you in your pregnancy when you dealt with body image issues before and then you were pregnant and had to watch your body change in ways that were good, but definitely new and outside of what you were used to?
Yeah. So I have struggled with disordered body image, disordered eating for most of my life. And it really came to a head, I think, when I was about 24. It was like right before I met my husband. And so I got pregnant at 27. And so I wasn't too far removed from that experience where my disordered eating like really hit a fever pitch. And then from there, I had started the long and slow process of recovery. But part of my eating disorder recovery involved gaining quite a bit of weight, not like on purpose, not like my doctor said, you need to gain weight to have the emotional experience of it. It's that I had damaged my body so deeply that when I started eating like a normal person, I put on a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And that feeling of being so out of control when I had been so in control for so many years before that, of what I ate, what I did, how I exercised, what I looked like, having the experience of gaining a lot of weight really fast, which was one of my deepest fears, and being out of control of that process was incredibly jarring and a little bit traumatic. And so, it took me many years. Like I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was when I got pregnant. And I think that this is always going to be something that is evolving in me that I'm learning and growing from. I don't think I'll ever have arrived at this perfect place of healthy body image. But when I got pregnant, suddenly, you're expected to gain weight, and you gain a lot of it, even if like a normal healthy amount of weight to gain, like it's still a lot in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredibly jarring, and it's for a great cause. Like it is for our health, and it is for our baby's health. And this is how it should be. And it's beautiful. And it's, again, how God designed it.
Yeah.
And so in both cases, this weight gain for me was important physically and emotionally, and it was necessary, and it was the healthiest thing that I could do. And yet it felt so like that the feeling of gaining weight in pregnancy was so similar to the out of control feeling that I felt when I was recovering from an eating disorder, that it was really something I had to work hard to get through, and to remind myself that I'm not doing anything wrong. Like this is not a moral failing. This is not a self-discipline failing. This is my body doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And again, pregnancy, it forced me to listen to my body for the first time. And I've always thought people who say that are a little bit too woo-woo for me, because come on, like our bodies don't talk to us.
Oh, but they do.
But they do. My poor
Oh, but
body
they
had been
do.
talking to me for so long. And because I lead with, self-discipline and control, like we were saying before, I'm the kind that I'm going to push through absolutely anything. I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to dig my heels in deeper, and I'm going to get through whatever it is that I'm trying to get through. And in pregnancy, our bodies just will not be ignored. And so that voice came through loud and clear many times when I couldn't hold down vegetables and meat and all the things that I normally ate. And I had to eat chips and popcorn and guacamole and, lots and lots and lots of fried chicken. And when, it suddenly became more important to me to listen to what my body actually wanted and to take care of myself in that way than it was to be good. I'm using that in air quotes,
Yeah.
whatever good meant, to be
Right.
perfect.
Right.
And when I had to change up my exercise routine, because again, my body was crying out for me to stop. And it wasn't just my body anymore, right? It was my baby too.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, it wasn't just that I was trying to control and subdue my own body, which ultimately I would pay the price for if I went too far with it. But suddenly it was about my child too. And of course, I wasn't willing to do anything that would put her at risk. And so I had to start treating my body with much more, again, like that tenderness and that graciousness and that deep affection and love.
Yeah.
Because what I did to my body, I was also doing to my baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that in a way to like instill fear in pregnant women, right? Because we all have this instinct that we're going to do something bad during pregnancy or we're going to mess it up somehow. That's not what I mean. But I mean that I had to take a really good look at habits that I thought were healthy that actually were deeply harmful to my body. And I had to choose something different. And I think what gave me the power to make that different choice and to choose a new future for my relationship with my body was the fact that I was suddenly sharing it with someone else.
Yeah.
Pregnancy is this unbelievable sacrificial act of hospitality. And in that act, we learn to listen to this home we're creating for our baby and to treat it with honor and care and respect, and to just do everything we can to help it thrive. And that really changed things for me.
Well, I love that it's almost like during your pregnancy, it was the first time that you realized you maybe were living your life before compartmentalizing the physical, the spiritual, the emotional. And in pregnancy, you realize they all work intertwined.
Yeah.
The way that you looked at your body before, you separated it from mental because it's something that you had power over. It's something that you brought into submission with your mind. And it wasn't like you were listening to your body. That's usually how we get injured, right? Our mind tells our body to do something our body cannot do. Yet we continue to tell our body to do it. And then, oh, look at that. Now I have a sprained ankle. Or now, I've done something else. Totally been there. Which is awesome that the mind has that power. But when you learn to listen to your body, how it's connected, and that it's all working together as one, it gives you so much more freedom and so much more peace because you don't feel like one is dominating over the other, and you don't feel like you have to like I don't know if whip it into shape is what I mean to say, but it's like you let that go. You let that standard and that expectation go when you realize, like you said, that you were sharing it with someone else, and it helped you realize that it all works together and that it's beautiful the way that it's working together, and just embrace the journey that you're on right now. Let go of the other things that you had struggled with before. And your husband helped you with that too. I love the part in there where you were going through your closet and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm outgrowing all these clothes. My belly's getting so much bigger. And your husband was just like, is this the relationship that you want if you have a daughter, do you want her to see you like this with your clothes? And I was like, gosh, that really hit home for me. And I don't even have a daughter, right? But if I did, I would want to empower her too. And I think in your book, you shared like that was a light bulb moment for you where you were like, You're right.
Mhm.
I want to be a good example, and I want to change how I've done this in the past. And it's almost like pregnancy and motherhood let you have the freedom to do that. Like, uh, uh, what would you say? Here's a free ride, like a free ticket
Yeah.
to just let all the other stuff go and just move on in a new direction. So
Yeah.
I thought that
Yeah.
was
And I think pregnancy is it's such a short amount of time, right? I mean, it doesn't feel short when you're in it,
no.
but
Once
it's
it's a
this
month seven
very,
and eight, you're like, what is going on? Yeah,
what is happening to time? This is taking so long. But it really is like just this snapshot in time where our body's change is celebrated, which
yeah,
is not something that our culture really celebrates in women's bodies otherwise. Like we are expected to look the same, the
yeah,
same, the same, the same.
yeah.
Um, and that our bodies aren't supposed to change. They're not supposed to age. They're not supposed to get bigger. They're not supposed to get too
Right.
small. And they're always supposed to look young.
Mm-hmm.
And in pregnancy, our bodies change very rapidly, again, in that short amount of time. And it's celebrated and it's beautiful and it's exactly how it's supposed to be. And so I've tried to carry those lessons through into postpartum and especially postpartum with baby number two, because I am really far from what I looked and even functioned like sometimes. You know, it's not just about looks, it's about that my whole physical self has changed since I had, before I had that first baby. And I try to carry those lessons with me, to say that my body isn't static. It's not
Right.
supposed to be the same. Just like my spirit, like you said, it's all intertwined. My spirit is not supposed to stay the same. My emotions, my mental health, like it's not all supposed to stay the same. It's always evolving, it's always changing, it's always growing. And that is absolutely a gift. We we're humans. We're not meant to stay the same. And that doesn't mean that I have to love absolutely every change that my body has been through. Like I do not love every change that children have brought to my body. But I also know that it's the work of being human, right? Like I am not supposed to look like I did when I was in middle school or high school or whatever, because this version of my body has done and lived and seen so many more things. And it carries all of that with me. And
Yes.
so trying to embrace the beauty in that I'm carrying around so much more, not in a burdened way, but in a like, look what I can do now kind of way.
And accomplished. Like it's accomplished so much.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. I've loved this. You're so good with words and you just paint beautiful pictures. I really hope everybody goes out and gets your book because it was a breath of fresh air and just so beautiful to relive so much of being pregnant. Not everybody experiences a great pregnancy, but it was nice to have your perspective and just see things through your eyes. So thank you for that. Brittany, if you had one parting message to share with mamas, is there anything that you hope they take away from this book or that you really would love for them to know before we close out?
So the one piece of sort of advice that I usually leave, especially new moms with who are maybe pregnant or, walking through new and postpartum life for the first time is I try to flesh out the give yourself grace idea, because I think we hear that a lot and it's so true. Like it's so, so true. But sometimes it's hard to know how to actually do that, how to actually think about it, how to actually show ourselves grace. And so something that was helpful for me, I don't remember who told me to do this or who helped me think of it this way, but I like to pass it on as like my emotional gift to new moms, is that think of yourself in terms of your baby's age. If your baby is 1 week old, then you are 1 week old. You're not 28 or 32 or 41. Because again, we're carrying all those beautiful life experiences with us, but we're new to this. And it can feel wildly uncomfortable at first, like this new self that we're trying to figure out, this new motherhood self. And so I think a really practical way to give yourself grace is to remember that you're new at this too. You're a learner right alongside your child. So you're a 1 week old mom, you're a 2 month old mom, you're a 6 month old mom.
Yeah.
And I think if we can show our babies the grace and the compassion and the empathy of watching them learn to be new humans, then we can turn that around on ourselves and say, I am doing a really good job for a 3-month-old mom.
There you
And, I think it can also remind us to ask for help because we're new at this. And so that's all. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's always what I want to leave new moms with, because I think it's just such a practical way to reframe those early motherhood struggles. When we feel like we're these empowered women on top of the world, but also, is my baby's poop supposed to look like that? I don't know. Like, how does this swaddle work? I don't know. There's just so much we're learning in this new season. And so I hope that you all will give yourself the same patience that you give to those precious little ones.
That is so good. And I love that too, because I remember as a new mom, like studying my baby, like learning that baby, and that every baby is different. Like you think you know it with your first one, and then you have a second one and you're like, whose kid is this? This is not the same one that happened the first time. What's going on? And like our second child, I just knew what to do. The first one, no, I didn't know what to do. And it was really hard to study him and to learn him. But just like you said, like, you're new at this. It's okay that you don't know what is happening. I love that. And giving yourself grace in that way is a fresh outlook that I never had before. I wish I knew that as a first time mom, because I definitely wouldn't have been so hard on myself. And reading all the self-help and all the gurus about how to get your kid to stop crying, get them to go to sleep and all that, and just realize you're new at this, they're new at this, we'll get through this. So, Brittany, how can we find you on social media and connect with you? Where would you direct us to?
I hang out mostly on Instagram. I'm at Brittany L. Bergman there, and I'm on Facebook too, quite a bit less frequently. But if you do hang out on Facebook, I'm there also at Brittany L. Bergman. And I would love to connect. The book Expecting Wonder is also available. You can find it through my Instagram profile. It's on Amazon, Target.com, Barnes & Noble, all the major online retailers.
Awesome. And I highly recommend it that they get Expecting Wonder, the Transformative Experience of Becoming a Mother by Brittany Bergman. Thank you, Brittany. How can I pray for you to finish out today? Anything
that is specific? Such a kind thing to ask. We have had a little bit of a tough week with a COVID scare at my kid's school, which ended up being a false positive. But now I feel like we're all kind of reeling and dealing with the same emotions that we had in like March and April, and just trying to kind of take a deep breath and come down from that experience and find ways to, even though we've been stuck in this house together for a very long time, I would love prayer that we would find ways to connect really deeply, even as we have this overabundance of togetherness.
Oh, that's so good. Quality connection, not just quantity.
Yes.
Awesome. Let's pray together. God, thank you for my sister. Thank you that we can have this fun conversation and just relish in the beauty of the gift of motherhood and being able to labor and co-labor with you and co-create with you, and the fact that you would invite us into that as mothers and as your children, and show us that relationship that you have with us, that we have with our children. God, I thank you for just the opportunity. I thank you for the blessing of Brittany's book. I thank you for guiding her in writing this book, and for all the mamas that it will bless when they get it in their hands, Lord. I'm grateful for that, and I pray for them even in advance right now. Lord, I lift up to you Brittany and her family. Lord, I thank you for bringing them through this COVID scare. That is an awful feeling that I know they were so in angst about, but thank you for your peace in that. Thank you for a false positive. God, thank you that you protect us, that you go behind us, before us, around us, within us. God, I thank you for those promises that are yes in Christ, and just knowing that you place a hedge of protection around us. I just pray that over her and her family and her children. God, I pray that this is a year of favor for them. I pray that you would just show them your favor in the coming year. I pray that you would open up their eyes to the opportunity that you have for them, their hopes and desires and dreams that we didn't even get to talk about tonight. Lord, I just pray that you'd be in that and just bless that they could be a blessing for you, Lord. I just thank you for the time they've had together. I just pray that in the time they've had together, they would grow deeper in connection and just the quality of time, that they would not let it just go by the wayside because there seems to be so much of it, but help them embrace these moments because they're so fleeting. God, thank you for our little ones. Thank you for Brittany and her husband and them committing to raise their children in Christ and just sharing that love with the world and having an impact that outlives them. God, thank you for this time. I pray you bless Brittany as she goes her separate way from me, and bless her until we meet again. And I just lift it all up to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Good News Mama. If you did, please leave me a review on iTunes. A 5-star review is best, and hit subscribe. Share with your friends on Instagram and Facebook. Please email me at lynn@goodnewsmama.com. You know I love questions. I love feedback. I want to know what you want to know. We're going to talk about what means something to you. So let's hear it. Follow me on Instagram at Good News Mamas. That's mamas with an S. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Keep your head up, keep your heart humble, and share that good news.